A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Tonight, we have new video that investigators say shows Sade Robinson's car driving away from Maxwell Anderson's home the night he killed her.
Now, this new video comes after more body parts were found today along Lake Michigan.
The video is timestamped at 12:47 a.m. in the early morning hours of April 2nd, roughly 3 hours after Anderson and Robinson arrived at his home.
April 2, 2024. A jogger's morning routine along the shores of Lake Michigan at Warnemont Park in Cudahy, Wisconsin, comes to an abrupt, horrifying halt. There, partially buried in the sand, is a human leg. Severed at the hip, the toenails still perfectly painted pink. This discovery would be just the first piece of a macabre puzzle, one that began less than 24 hours earlier, when 19-year-old Sade Robinson stepped out for what should have been an ordinary first date. What started as a hopeful evening for this bright college student ended as one of Wisconsin's most horrific murder cases in recent memory. Her dismembered body scattered across Milwaukee County like discarded trash. In surveillance footage from that night, we see Sade sitting at a bar beside 33-year-old Maxwell Anderson. She's smiling, laughing even, completely unaware that the man beside her would become her alleged killer before the night was through. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. Spring of 2024, as America emerged from another Midwestern winter, Milwaukee's dating scene was buzzing with the same energy seen across the country. Dating apps had become not just normalized but expected, transforming how young people connected. Gone were the days when meeting someone meant introductions through friends or chance encounters at local hangouts. Now, profiles were swiped, messages exchanged, and dates arranged with strangers in a matter of minutes. For 19-year-old Sade Robinson, like millions of other young women in America, this digital landscape was simply the reality of modern dating, convenient yet fraught with invisible risks. Amid finishing her criminal justice degree at Milwaukee Area Technical College, working shifts at a local pizza restaurant, and balancing family responsibilities, finding connection meant navigating these waters with caution but hope. April in Milwaukee remains unforgiving, the promise of spring constantly undermined by frigid gusts sweeping off Lake Michigan. The massive freshwater sea that borders the city isn't just scenery. With water temperatures still hovering around 40 degrees, it's a powerful, deadly force. Its currents cold enough to kill within minutes, its depths capable of concealing secrets indefinitely. The vibrant college corridors where Sade walked daily stood in sharp contrast to the undercurrent of violence that occasionally erupted in the city. Milwaukee's homicide rate had been concerning residents, with young women of color disproportionately affected by violent crime, a statistic that rarely made national headlines but was painfully real to local communities. When Sade agreed to meet Maxwell Anderson at a seafood restaurant on April 1st, she followed the cardinal rule of modern dating: meet in public. This standard precaution gives a sense of control, of safety. The restaurant setting, with witnesses all around, should have been the testing ground, the safe space to determine whether to proceed further. But what Sade couldn't know was that the public first meeting was merely the opening act in a calculated performance designed to gain her trust just long enough to lure her away from safety. Sade Carlina Robinson came into this world on May 10, 2004. Born in Mississippi, she would carry the warmth and resilience of her southern roots throughout her life, even after her family relocated to Milwaukee in search of broader educational opportunities and a fresh start. In Milwaukee, Sade built a life centered around family, particularly her close bond with her mother Sheena Scarborough and younger sister Adriana RAINN. Like many siblings, their relationship evolved over time. Adriana would later recall how they fought as young siblings do, their childhood marked by the typical squabbles that often disguise deeper connections. But as they matured, that foundation transformed into something profound and nurturing. "Anyone who knew us knew that she was the person who you wanted to talk to," Adriana would tell mourners a year after her sister's death, her voice breaking with emotion. She could put a smile on anyone's face. Despite her youth, Sade stepped naturally into a caretaker role within the family. Even with her demanding schedule of work and studies, she would make time to cook meals for her younger sister. This wasn't occasional help. It was a consistent act of love and responsibility that spoke volumes about her character. By early 2024, Sade had built an impressive life for someone just approaching her 20th birthday. She was mere weeks away from graduating from Milwaukee Area Technical College with an associate's degree in criminal justice, a field she had chosen with purpose and passion. Friends would later say she spoke often about wanting to help others and make a difference in her community. The path hadn't been easy. To put herself through school, Sade worked at Pizza Shuttle, a popular restaurant on Milwaukee's East Side. There, she wasn't just another employee, she was a presence that left an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. Very outgoing, she would talk to everybody here. She was always there to lighten the mood, recalled Justin Ramona, one of the managers at Pizza Shuttle. Her colleagues described an energy that transformed the workplace, someone whose absence would be immediately felt. But perhaps nothing captured Sade's essence quite like her laugh, described by those who loved her as iconic and unmatchable. It was the kind of genuine expression that pulled others into its orbit, infectious and wholly authentic. Behind that laugh was a young woman of remarkable discipline. While many her age struggled with the competing demands of work and education, Sade managed both with a maturity beyond her years. She wasn't just attending classes, she was excelling, positioning herself for a meaningful career in criminal justice. A cruel irony, given how her story would unfold. When she vanished on April 2, 2024, Sade Robinson wasn't just a name or a statistic. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a student weeks from graduation, and a young woman whose determination had earned her a future full of promise. A future that was violently stolen from her on what should have been just another ordinary spring day. While Sade Robinson was building a life of purpose and promise, Maxwell Anderson was crafting something entirely different, a carefully constructed facade concealing a deeply disturbing reality. At 33 years old, Anderson was no impulsive youth. The Milwaukee resident had lived enough life to make choices, establish patterns, and reveal his true character through his actions. And those actions spoke volumes about the man behind the mask. Court records revealed a troubling history that should have served as a warning. Anderson's past included charges of domestic abuse, violence directed at those closest to him. Multiple drunk driving incidents demonstrated a pattern of reckless disregard for others' safety. Disorderly conduct charges punctuated his record. Public displays of aggression that hinted at deeper, darker impulses barely contained beneath the surface. Yet somehow he managed to navigate society, holding jobs and presenting a functional exterior to the world. At the time he met Sade, Anderson had previously worked at the very seafood restaurant where they would have their fateful first date, a place where he knew the layout, the staff, perhaps even how to appear comfortable and trustworthy in that environment. The 14-year age gap between them, Anderson at 33, Sade just 19, represented more than just numbers. It embodied a vast gulf in life experience, in power dynamics, in vulnerability. While Sade was still finding her footing in early adulthood, Anderson had spent years developing the skills to identify, isolate, and exploit the trust of others. What investigators would later discover about Anderson's home sent shockwaves through the community. Law enforcement reports described blood on the walls, the physical evidence of violence that had transpired within those private spaces. Even more disturbing, media reports indicated officers discovered what was described as a sex dungeon in the basement, a space that suggested premeditation, preparation, and purpose far beyond the spontaneous encounter Anderson would likely claim. The stark contrast between how Anderson presented himself to the outside world and the reality of his private life represents a chilling reminder of how predators operate in plain sight. To casual observers, to neighbors, perhaps even to Sade during those early hours of their date, he may have appeared normal, even charming. This carefully crafted exterior served as camouflage, allowing him to move through society undetected. Most disturbingly, what investigators pieced together in the aftermath of Sade's murder wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. The evidence pointed to something far more calculated: the timing of their movements, from public to private spaces, the disposal of remains across multiple locations, the burning of her vehicle to destroy evidence. Each element suggested planning, foresight, and a methodical approach to both the crime itself and the attempted concealment of it, revealing a predator who had perhaps been preparing for this moment long before Sade Robinson ever crossed his path. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. April 1, 2024. A Monday that began like any other for Sade Robinson, but would end in unimaginable horror. That morning, Sade's enthusiasm for her upcoming date was evident to everyone around her. An employee in her apartment building would later tell investigators that Sade had specifically mentioned how excited she was about meeting Maxwell Anderson that evening. This wasn't just casual interest. She was genuinely looking forward to the connection, the possibility. She texted Anderson directly about her dining preferences, feeling seafood, a simple message that would inadvertently seal her fate by leading her to the restaurant where Anderson had once worked, a place where he would have the home field advantage of familiarity. With the care and consideration typical of a 19-year-old preparing for a promising date, Sade chose her outfit deliberately. Ripped jeans paired with a white shirt. We know this specific detail not from friend recollections or social media posts, but from the grim reality that these same clothes would later be identified among the burned remnants in her car. As the day progressed, Sade went about her normal routine, attending classes, perhaps finishing assignments, unaware that her movements were simply the prelude to tragedy. Each mundane decision, each ordinary action of April 1st, was carrying her inexorably toward a predator's orbit. By early evening, she arrived at the seafood restaurant where Anderson was waiting. Surveillance cameras captured them sitting together at the bar, imagery that would later become crucial evidence, but in the moment was nothing more than two people getting acquainted. To other patrons, to the staff, there was nothing remarkable about the scene, just another first date unfolding in a public place, exactly as dating safety guidelines recommend. Their conversation flowed, and Anderson apparently suggested continuing the evening. According to phone location data later recovered by investigators, the pair moved from the restaurant to a nearby sports bar, another public venue, another seemingly safe decision that maintained the appearance of a normal date progression. What happened next represents the critical turning point in Sade's story. At some point during the evening, Anderson suggested they go to his home. This moment, this decision, was the invisible threshold between safety and mortal danger. We'll never know what convinced Sade to cross it. Perhaps Anderson had spent hours building trust, presenting himself as harmless and genuine. Perhaps he offered some innocent-sounding reason to briefly stop by his place. Whatever persuasive tactics he employed, they worked. The tracking data from Sade's phone, later discovered through a location-sharing app by her concerned mother and friend, reveals the fatal journey, from the restaurant to the sports bar and then to Anderson's residence, each ping of her phone location marking another step toward the unthinkable. What makes this case so terrifying is the ordinary nature of how the evening began. There were no obvious red flags visible to outsiders, no dramatic scenes in public, no documented distress calls. Just a normal-seeming date that progressed through the typical stages, from a restaurant to another venue to a private location, a pattern repeated thousands of times every weekend across America. Except this time, one participant was methodically leading the other toward a horrific end. As Sade entered Anderson's home, The last thin thread of safety was severed. She was now isolated with a predator, away from the protective gaze of surveillance cameras and witnesses, beyond the reach of easy help. The mundane beginning of their evening together had disguised the nightmare that was about to unfold behind closed doors. The morning of April 2nd arrived with a conspicuous absence at Pizza Shuttle. Sade Robinson hadn't shown up for her shift, an immediate red flag to those who knew her dependable nature. "We kind of knew something was up. We had been calling her all day," Justin Romano, the manager on duty, would later tell local media. His voice carried the weight of retrospective dread as he added, "This wasn't like her at all." By nightfall, with no word from Sade and all calls going unanswered, one of her friends made the call to Milwaukee police. The alarming pattern, missed work, no communication, complete silence on social media, wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented for the responsible young woman. Officers responded with a welfare check at Sade's apartment, but found no trace of her there, no signs of disturbance, no indications of her current whereabouts, just the unsettling emptiness of a home whose occupant had vanished. But even as police were beginning their initial inquiries, evidence of something horrific was already surfacing across the city. That very morning, authorities had responded to reports of a vehicle fire. What they discovered was Sade's 2020 Honda Civic engulfed in flames. The criminal complaint would later describe extreme fire damage, completely damaging the interior. A deliberate attempt to destroy evidence through fire's purifying destruction. Despite the extensive damage, investigators would later recover fragments of physical evidence from the vehicle, remnants of the white shirt and ripped jeans Sade had worn on her date, along with pieces of what appeared to be her iPhone. Each charred fragment was another breadcrumb on the trail of horror that was just beginning to emerge. Then came the discovery that would transform a missing person case into something far more sinister. Later that same day, at Warnemont Park in Cudahy, a Milwaukee suburb along Lake Michigan's shore, a pedestrian made a gruesome find. A human leg had washed up on the beach. The limb appeared to have been sawn off at the hip, according to the criminal complaint, suggesting not a traumatic accident, but a deliberate dismemberment. Preliminary examination determined the leg belonged to a black woman approximately 5 feet tall, matching Sade's description. The grim reality began to take shape even before preliminary DNA testing confirmed what many already feared. The remains belonged to Sade Robinson. For investigators, for Sade's family, for the entire community, the horrifying truth was becoming impossible to deny. The vibrant young woman who had set out for a first date just over 24 hours earlier hadn't simply gone missing. She had been killed, her body deliberately dismembered, the evidence methodically scattered to conceal the crime. The emerging pattern pointed to something beyond a momentary act of violence. This was premeditated evil. The killer had taken calculated steps, dismembering the body to complicate identification, burning the vehicle to destroy evidence, disposing of remains across multiple locations to hinder recovery efforts. Each action revealing not just brutality, but a cold, tactical approach to concealment. As the sun set on April 2nd, Milwaukee faced the dawning realization that a predator had walked among them, had selected a victim, had executed a plan with meticulous cruelty, and might still be free, potentially searching for another target. As Milwaukee reeled from the horror of Sade's dismembered remains washing ashore, investigators were already piecing together the digital record of her final hours, an electronic ghost trail that would lead them directly to her killer. In a twist of tragic irony, it was Sade's own careful safety precautions that would help solve her murder. Her mother, Sheena Scarborough, and a concerned friend accessed a location-sharing app on her phone, a digital breadcrumb trail revealing Sade's movements on April 1st. The data painted a clear picture, from the seafood restaurant to a nearby sports bar, then to Maxwell Anderson's residence in northwest Milwaukee, and finally to Warnemont Park, the very location where her leg would be discovered. The phone's journey ended at the park, Around 3 a.m. on April 2nd, a digital timestamp marking the approximate moment her killer disposed of her remains in Lake Michigan's frigid waters. With these electronic markers establishing a timeline and a suspect, police moved quickly. But even as the investigation accelerated, Lake Michigan continued to yield its grim evidence. On April 6th, as officers canvassed the area where Sade's burned car had been discovered, they found more human remains, a foot, and what was described in the criminal complaint as what appeared to be human flesh. Forensic examination confirmed what was already feared. These two belonged to Sade Robinson. The search for her remained unrelenting. On April 18th, a civilian walking along a remote tree-lined stretch of South Milwaukee Beach made another horrific discovery. A human torso and an arm had washed ashore. The Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office confirmed these remains were also believed to be Sade's. The lake wasn't finished revealing its secrets. Nearly a month later, on May 16th, a human arm was discovered along the shoreline at Waukegan Municipal Beach in Illinois, some 50 miles south of Milwaukee. Though definitive identification proved challenging, authorities investigated whether this too was part of Sade's remains carried south by Lake Michigan's powerful currents. Meanwhile, evidence against Maxwell Anderson was mounting rapidly. A search of his home revealed blood on the walls, the silent testimony of violence that had occurred there. The discovery of several gasoline containers corroborated the theory that he had deliberately burned Sade's car to destroy evidence. Most disturbing were media reports indicating officers had found what was described as a sex dungeon in Anderson's basement, a space suggesting premeditation and predatory intent that extended beyond a single victim. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. On April 4th, just 2 days after Sade was reported missing, police arrested Maxwell Anderson. Though initially held on suspicion while the investigation continued, formal charges would follow on April 12th: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson of property other than a building. The charging document didn't mince words about the calculated nature of the crime. The facts mentioned in this complaint caused complainant to conclude that the defendant intentionally killed and then dismembered Robinson with the intent to conceal the homicide, and it occurred between the arrival at the defendant's residence and his departure from the Warnimont Park area. In just 10 days, investigators had moved from the discovery of unidentified human remains to charging a suspect with one of the most heinous murders in recent Milwaukee history, a testament to both modern investigative techniques and the killer's inability to fully cover his tracks, despite his methodical efforts to conceal evidence. As Anderson faced the justice system, the community confronted a chilling truth. The monster responsible for Sade's dismemberment had been hiding in plain sight all along. While the justice system began its methodical proceedings against Maxwell Anderson, the shockwaves of Sade's murder rippled outward, first devastating her family, then mobilizing an entire community determined that her death would not be in vain. For Sheena Scarborough, Sade's mother, the loss was incomprehensible. At a memorial event marking 1 year since her daughter's disappearance, Scarborough stood before supporters, her grief still raw. "I miss you so much, baby girl," she said, her voice breaking as she alternated between tears and firm resolve. The words, simple yet profound, captured the permanent wound left by her daughter's absence. Adriana Reams, Sade's younger sister, shared memories that humanized the young woman who had become a headline. She could put a smile on anyone's face, Adriana recalled. Her laugh was iconic for one, and unmatchable. She spoke of their evolving relationship, from childhood squabbles to the deep bond they formed as they matured, and how Sade would cook for her despite her hectic schedule, demonstrating love through everyday acts of care. The community's response was immediate and powerful. Several dozen members gathered for what they called a pink-out event, transforming Maxwell Anderson's front lawn into a makeshift memorial adorned with Sade's favorite color. Pink balloons, flowers, stuffed animals, and posters created a visual testament that reclaimed the space associated with her killer as a place to honor her memory instead. Similar memorials appeared at Pizza Shuttle, where Sade had worked. Co-workers and customers, many who had never met her but felt connected to her story, left tokens of remembrance and grief. Pink ribbons and flowers accumulated, each item a small stand against the darkness of what had happened. In the courtroom, Milwaukee prosecutors didn't mince words about the extraordinary brutality of the crime. The assistant district attorney described the killing and dismemberment of Robinson as the highest level of violence imaginable, a rare official acknowledgement of the extreme depravity involved. Perhaps most surprising was the statement issued by Stephen Anderson, the father of the accused killer. On April 18, 2024, as news broke of additional remains being discovered, he released a message through his son's attorneys. On behalf of myself and my family, I would like to express our deepest sympathy and heartfelt condolences to the family and loved ones of Sade Robinson. We are shocked and devastated by her senseless death. To Sade's parents, he added, "Words cannot express our sorrow for the incomprehensible pain and grief you are going through." The community's commitment to honoring Sade continued months after her death. In September 2024, a vibrant mural of Sade Robinson was painted near the entrance of Pizza Shuttle, ensuring that her face, her smile, would remain a daily presence in the place where she had brought so much joy to others. But perhaps the most significant legacy emerged from her mother's determination to transform grief into action. Sheena Scarborough established Sade's Voice Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting missing persons and crime victims, with special focus on Black, Brown, and Indigenous women and girls who disappear at disproportionate rates, yet receive less media attention and fewer resources. "This is a pandemic that needs to be addressed," Scarborough declared, channeling her personal anguish into advocacy. She began working with state legislators to create a task force dedicated to gathering statistics on missing women of color and addressing the systemic inequities in how these cases are handled. Through each memorial, each statement, each new initiative, a powerful message emerged. Sade Robinson would be remembered not just for how she died, but for who she was and the change her story could create. As the community rallied around Sade's memory, the machinery of justice ground forward with excruciating slowness for those left behind. In the sterile environment of Milwaukee County Criminal Court, Maxwell Anderson made his first appearances, a stark contrast to the vibrant young woman whose life he was accused of taking. Anderson entered a not guilty plea to all charges: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, the court, recognizing both the severity of the crimes and the potential flight risk, set bail at an extraordinary $5 million, ensuring he would remain behind bars while awaiting trial. By September 2024, Anderson's defense team had begun strategic maneuvers, filing a motion to sever the charges, essentially requesting separate trials for the homicide and the arson of Sade's vehicle. Their argument hinged on portraying the car burning as a separate crime, disconnected from the murder itself. In a critical September 13th hearing, Judge Laura Crivello rejected this attempt, ruling that all charges would be tried together. Her decision was unequivocal. All of the evidence related to the arson is relevant to establishing motive. The motive to get away from the homicide and cause the mutilation. The judge's reasoning extended beyond legal technicalities to consider the human cost of prolonged proceedings. It would be difficult, devastating, I would say, to have to be at two different trials, Crivello stated. Severance of the charges in this case would serve to prolong the proceedings and would be contrary to the interests and rights of the victims. With this ruling, the path seemed clear for the December 9, 2024 trial date. Sade's family clung to this timeline, desperately needing closure as the first anniversary of her death approached. But their hopes were shattered when, in early December, the defense filed a motion to adjourn, claiming they needed more time to analyze evidence from Anderson's phone. Despite prosecutors stating they were prepared to proceed, Judge Crivello granted the delay, setting a new trial date of May 27, 2025, pushing justice more than a full year after the murder. For Sheena Scarborough, this delay was another wound inflicted by the system through her attorney. She released a blistering statement that captured her anguish and frustration. Computerized records in a digital age were created for the speed and transfer of information. So why was the information not requested when this case first started? Why were experts not retained and issues not discussed until November, when the entire world knew that one of the ways he was connected to this case was his cell phone? I know we are not supposed to judge until you are proven to be guilty, but I am angry, and he did not wait to murder my daughter, and I should not have to wait for justice. The raw emotion in her words resonated beyond the courtroom, highlighting how procedural delays in the legal system inflict their own form of suffering on victims' families, forcing them to put grief on hold while they wait for resolution that constantly seems to recede into the distance. As of early 2025, the case remains in this legal limbo. Court hearings continue, with each brief status update confirming the trial remains on track for May, but offering little substantive progress. For the Robinson family, each passing day is another without closure, another with the knowledge that while they struggle with their loss, the legal system moves at its own deliberate pace, indifferent to their pain. Sade Robinson's story, while uniquely heartbreaking, exists within a broader pattern that demands our attention. Across America, Black women and girls go missing at rates that should trigger national alarm, yet their disappearances often receive a fraction of the media coverage and investigative resources devoted to similar cases involving white women. The statistics are sobering. Between 2016 and 2022, Black women represented 40% of domestic violence homicides in Milwaukee County alone, a stark overrepresentation compared to their percentage of the population. Nationwide, the pattern persists. While Black girls make up about 15% of the female population under 18, they account for nearly 40% of missing girls in many jurisdictions, as Sheena Scabra stated with unflinching clarity at the memorial event marking 1 year since her daughter's death. This is a pandemic that needs to be addressed. Her words weren't mere rhetoric, but a call to action that she herself has answered. Through establishing Sade's Voice Foundation and advocating alongside state legislators, Scarborough has channeled her grief into creating a task force dedicated to gathering statistics on missing women of color and addressing the systemic inequities in how these cases are handled. In April 2025, nearly 100 people gathered at Warnemont Park, the very location where the first of Sade's remains were discovered, for what they called an angelversary. Against the backdrop of Lake Michigan, the same waters that had carried her remains to shore now witnessed a community united in remembrance and resolve. At this memorial, Sade's uncle David Scarborough II, known as Lil Dave the Poet, delivered a poem that captured both the enduring pain of her absence and the determination to ensure her legacy. As attendees prepared to release pink balloons into the sky, he recited, "As we release these colors high, may they dance upon the sky, carrying our hopes and dreams. We'll remember you forevermore and cherish the love we shared before. Until we meet again and play our part, we fly these balloons through the pain." Sade Carlina Robinson is her name. The pink balloons soared upward, quickly swept away by the winds off Lake Michigan, a visual metaphor for how swiftly Sade's life had been taken, yet how her memory continued to travel onward, touching lives far beyond her own brief 19 years. What happened to Sade Robinson represents the darkest possibilities of human cruelty. But what has happened since, the community response, her mother's advocacy, the continued pressure for justice, represents humanity's capacity for resilience, compassion, and the pursuit of meaningful change born from tragedy. As Maxwell Anderson's trial date approaches, the Robinson family continues their agonizing wait. But through the foundation bearing Sade's name, through the mural that keeps her face visible in the community, through each conversation sparked by her story about the safety of young women and the particular vulnerabilities faced by women of color, Sade's influence continues. Attorney Verona Swanigan, representing Sade's mother, perhaps captured it best in her statement following yet another trial delay. "Justice may be delayed, but it will continue to be sought." For Sade Robinson, for the young woman with the unmatchable laugh who cooked for her sister despite her busy schedule, who was weeks away from a criminal justice degree, who left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. We can only hope that this promise holds true. May 10, 2003, 1:15 p.m. A phone call that would shatter everything. I know about the missing girl, Kings Highway. Look behind the abandoned house. The voice was cold, anonymous, then silence. L. Carmichael had been waiting for this call for 46 days. 46 days since her daughter Ramona walked out their front door to grab food at Burger King. 46 days since a 21-year-old honors student at Hunter College simply vanished off the streets of Brooklyn. When police arrived at that address, what they found would haunt them forever. A young woman's body, decomposed beyond recognition, wrapped in a blanket like garbage. But this was just the beginning. The basement where Ramona died would reveal the darkest corners of human evil: chains, restraints, evidence of torture that lasted for days, two predators who had turned kidnapping and murder into their twisted entertainment. This is 2003 Brooklyn, post-9/11 America, where immigrant families worked multiple jobs chasing the American dream, where honors students like Ramona Moore believed they were safe walking 3 blocks to get dinner. They were wrong. What happened to her family afterward exposed a system that failed her twice, first in life, then in death. This is the story the police didn't want to investigate, the case that almost never got solved, and the anonymous phone call that finally brought 2 monsters to justice. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. East Flatbush, Brooklyn, 2003. This wasn't the Brooklyn of gentrified coffee shops and luxury condos. This was working-class America. Caribbean families who'd fled poverty in Guyana, Jamaica, and Haiti for a shot at something better. They worked double shifts, cleaned office buildings at night, sent their kids to good schools during the day. The Moore family was exactly this story. Ramona's parents had immigrated from Guyana when she was 8, settling into a neighborhood where everyone knew your business, and that was supposed to keep you safe. This was post-9/11 New York, a city still jumping at every siren, still learning to trust again. But in neighborhoods like East Flatbush, people looked out for each other. Kids walked to corner stores alone. College students came home for family dinner. Mothers didn't lock their doors when they ran quick errands. The community had survived crack epidemics, budget cuts, and urban decay. They'd built something solid here. Churches on every corner, block parties in the summer, grandmothers watching from stoops, making sure everybody's children got home safe. But beneath this surface of community solidarity, predators were hunting. And when those predators struck, some victims would discover a brutal truth about American justice, that not all missing persons are created equal. When a young black woman disappeared in East Flatbush, police shrugged. When a white woman went missing in Manhattan the same week, they held press conferences. This is the America Ramona Moore lived in, where your zip code, your skin color, and your family's accent determined how hard anyone would look for you when you vanished. To understand what was stolen from this world, you need to know who Ramona Moore really was. October 8, 1981, Georgetown, Guyana. Ramona Gail Amanda Moore entered the world to parents who had nothing but dreams. Her father worked construction, her mother cleaned houses. They lived paycheck to paycheck in a country where opportunities were scarce and hope was a luxury few could afford. But they had a plan. America. The land where immigrant children became doctors and lawyers, where a little girl from Georgetown could become anything she wanted. When Ramona was 8, they made the leap, packed everything they owned into 2 suitcases and landed in New York City with $200 and a prayer. East Flatbush became home, a neighborhood where Guyanese families clustered together, speaking Creole on stoops, cooking curry and rice in tiny kitchens, rebuilding their lives one day at a time. Ramona's mother, L. Carmichael, worked 3 cleaning jobs. Office buildings at night, houses on weekends. Whatever it took to keep her daughter in good schools. Her father picked up construction work when he could find it. Every dollar they earned had one purpose: Ramona's future. She was their only child, their entire world, and she lived with 5 cousins who became her siblings in a cramped apartment where family dinner meant 8 people round a table built for 4. But that table was filled with love, with laughter, and with constant talk about Ramona's achievements. Her uncle Clifford Mann pushed her the hardest. When she showed him a report card full of A's, he didn't celebrate. "That's nothing," he told her. "Anyone can get an A. All I want you to do is maintain that. That's the difficult part." And she did. Ramona Moore never earned anything less than an A from elementary school through college. She chose psychology for a reason. She wanted to help people overcome trauma. Growing up in an immigrant household, she'd watched family members struggle with the psychological wounds of leaving everything behind. She understood pain. She wanted to heal it. By 2003, she was a third-year honors student at Hunter College. Her professors were amazed by her work ethic. While other students partied, Ramona was in the library until closing time. She had papers to write, internships to apply for, graduate school applications to perfect. But she wasn't all work. Every Christmas, Ramona made it her mission to buy gifts for everyone in the family. Didn't matter if she only had $20. Everyone got something to unwrap. Her cousins still remember her laugh, infectious and genuine. She could quote romantic comedies word for word, made mixtapes for friends, spent Saturdays hunting for bargains and sharing her finds with anyone who'd listen. Her dreams were crystal clear: graduate from Hunter, get into Columbia or NYU for graduate school, become a therapist specializing in childhood trauma, open a practice right here in East Flatbush, helping immigrant families navigate the American dream while healing from the American nightmare. She wanted to buy her mother a house. "Mama worked 3 jobs for me," she'd tell friends. "I'm going to work 3 jobs for her." Spring 2003 was everything falling into place. She was dating someone the family approved of, had landed a summer internship at a local mental health clinic, was excited about presenting her research on PTSD in immigrant communities. Ramona's routine was clockwork. Up at 6 a.m., commute to Hunter College in Manhattan, classes all day. Part-time job at a local daycare where the children adored her. Home by 7 p.m. to help her younger cousins with homework. Church every Sunday. Never stayed out past 10 p.m. without calling home. April 24th, 2003. Her last normal day. She attended psychology classes, turned in a major paper on PTSD that she'd spent weeks perfecting. Her professor later remembered she seemed excited about an upcoming presentation. Called her mother at 6 p.m. like always. "I'll be home for dinner, Mama." 6:55 p.m. Ramona Moore walked out her front door wearing jeans, sneakers, carrying a small purse. "I'm just going to get something at Burger King," she told her mother. 3 blocks away, 5-minute walk. She'd done it hundreds of times. But in 15 minutes, everything would change. She would never make it to that Burger King. While Ramona Moore was building a future, 2 predators were planning her destruction. Troy Hendricks, 22 years old. A violent criminal with a rap sheet stretching back to his teens. Assault charges, drug dealing. He lived in a basement apartment on Snyder Avenue, just blocks from where Ramona walked that night. But this wasn't just any basement. Hendricks had been preparing chains bolted to the walls, restraints, soundproofing materials. Neighbors would later tell police they'd heard construction noises, strange sounds coming from below. But in East Flatbush, you minded your own business. His partner was Kason Pearson, 24 years old, street name Monster, and he'd earned it. Multiple women had accused Pearson of sexual assault over the years. None of those cases were ever prosecuted. He walked free, bragging to friends about breaking in victims. Both men were alleged members of the East Flatbush Blood set. But this wasn't gang business. This was predation, pure and simple. They knew these streets, knew the patterns. Young women walking alone after classes, students coming home from part-time jobs. They'd been hunting for months, identifying targets, learning routines. Hendrix's basement wasn't just his apartment. It was a carefully constructed torture chamber. He'd invested time, money, and planning into creating the perfect prison. Thick walls to muffle screams, multiple restraint points, tools of torture readily available. They weren't opportunistic criminals. They were systematic predators who had turned kidnapping and torture into their entertainment. And on April 24, 2003, they found their next victim, a young woman walking alone. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. April 24, 2003, a Thursday evening that started like any other, 6:55 p.m. Ramona Moore kisses her mother goodbye. "I'm just running to Burger King. I'll be right back." She's wearing jeans and sneakers, carrying a small purse with maybe $20 inside. She has no idea that two predators have been prowling these same streets all evening, hunting. 7:15 p.m. Ramona stops at a friend's house to pick up a borrowed CD. Her friend would later remember how happy she seemed, talking about weekend plans, a presentation she was excited to give, her summer internship starting soon. Just a normal college student living a normal life. Meanwhile, Hendrix and Pearson are driving the neighborhood. They know these blocks intimately, know which streets are poorly lit, which corners don't have security cameras, where a young woman might walk alone. 7:30 p.m., Ramona leaves her friend's house, 3 blocks to Burger King. A 5-minute walk she'd made hundreds of times. Church Avenue to Remsen Avenue, turn right. Almost there. She never makes it. Witnesses would later tell police they saw a young woman talking to 2 men near a car. Not struggling, not screaming, just talking. Maybe they asked for directions. Maybe claimed they had car trouble. Maybe pretended to be lost. Whatever lie they told, it worked. By 7:45 p.m., Ramona Moore was in their vehicle. By 8 p.m., she was chained in Hendrix's basement. The Burger King security cameras would confirm she never walked through their doors. In 15 minutes, a brilliant young woman with her whole life ahead of her had vanished without a trace. Her mother was still setting the table for dinner, expecting her daughter to walk through the door any minute. But Ramona Moore would never come home again. What happened next defies human comprehension. Hendrix's basement apartment on Snyder Avenue, low ceilings, one small window painted black to block out light, to block out hope. This wasn't a home. It was a dungeon. Chains bolted to the walls, restraints, makeshift torture devices scattered around like tools in a workshop. The apartment had been soundproofed just enough that screams wouldn't carry to the street above. Neighbors later told police they'd heard strange noises coming from the basement, banging, muffled sounds. But in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, no one investigated. For 3 days, Ramona Moore endured unimaginable horror in that basement. Prosecutor Anna Siga Nicolazzi would later tell the jury, "Ramona Moore's injuries are indescribable. The horror she endured, the torture she endured will become clear. She was chained, beaten with dumbbells, burned with cigarettes, attacked with knives, saws, hammers, subjected to repeated sexual assault. The medical examiner would confirm the systematic nature of the torture. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated, prolonged, sadistic. But perhaps the most shocking testimony came from Ramondo Jack. Jack was a friend of Hendrix. He stopped by the basement during Ramondo's captivity. He saw her, chained, beaten, clearly a victim, clearly suffering, and he did nothing. In his own words at trial, he made no effort to save her life. Didn't call police, didn't even call for help. Instead, he went shopping, attended a baby shower, drove back home to Maryland. He saw a young woman being tortured to death and treated it like background noise. The prosecution asked him directly, "Why didn't you help her?" His answer haunted the courtroom. "I thought about it, but I didn't want to get involved." For 3 days, while Ramona's family was frantically searching the streets, posting flyers, begging police to investigate, she was alive in that basement, suffering, fighting to survive. Her mother was calling her cell phone every hour. Her cousins were walking the neighborhood with her picture. Her uncle was contacting politicians, demanding action, but the police had already closed her case. "Young women her age sometimes don't check in," they said. April 27, 2003, 3 days after her abduction, after enduring torture that would break the strongest person, Ramona Moore was murdered. Her body was wrapped in a blanket like garbage, dumped behind an abandoned house on Kings Highway, left to decompose while her killers went about their normal lives. Hendricks flooded his basement, trying to wash away the evidence, trying to erase what he'd done. Both men returned to their routines, hanging out with friends, going to parties, as if they hadn't just tortured and murdered an innocent woman, as if Ramona Moore had never existed at all. But they made one critical mistake. Their appetite for violence wasn't satisfied. 4 days later, they would strike again. April 25, 2003, 1 day after Ramona disappeared. Elle Carmichael walks into the 67th Precinct in East Flatbush. Her daughter never came home last night. Never called. This isn't like Ramona. The desk sergeant barely looks up. "How old is she?" 21. "Ma'am?" Many women her age fail to check in with their families for benign causes. She's probably with a boyfriend. Give it a few days. Elle Carmichael knows her daughter. Ramona calls if she's going to be 5 minutes late. Something is wrong. "I need you to open a missing persons case." "Sorry, the law sucks. She's over 18. We can't do anything." Case closed. No investigation. No paperwork. No effort. But here's what makes this story even more devastating. That same week across the river in Manhattan, another young woman goes missing. Svetlana Aronov, a white woman, a rare book dealer from the Upper East Side. 3 hours after Aronov is reported missing, NYPD launches a full investigation, press conferences, search teams, her photo plastered across every news station in the city. Meanwhile in Brooklyn, Elle Carmichael is making photocopies of her daughter's picture at Kinko's, spending her own money, walking the streets alone, taping flyers to telephone poles. The contrast is impossible to ignore. When a white woman disappears in Manhattan, it's breaking news. When a black woman disappears in Brooklyn, police say, "Give it a few days." April 26th. 2 days missing. Carmichael contacts ABC News hoping for coverage. They call the 67th Precinct for comment. The police tell the media the case is closed. Her daughter has been missing for 2 days and they've already given up. The Carmichael family takes matters into their own hands. They print hundreds of flyers, knock on doors, contact local politicians. City Councilman Charles Barron starts making calls, demanding action. Finally, under political pressure, the NYPD agrees to reopen Ramona's case. April 28, 2003. 4 days after she disappeared. But here's the cruel irony that will haunt this family forever. Ramona Moore was murdered on April 27th, 1 day before police resumed their search. If they had acted immediately, like they did for Svetlana Aronov, Ramona might still be alive. While the official investigation stalled, Hendricks and Pearson's appetite for violence wasn't satisfied. Days after murdering Ramona, they struck again. A 15-year-old girl walking home from school. Same neighborhood, same tactics. They lured her to the same basement where Ramona had died, but this victim fought back. After being sexually assaulted and bound with duct tape, she did something extraordinary. She licked the adhesive on the tape covering her mouth until it loosened, worked herself free while her attackers slept, She escaped, ran to police, gave descriptions, provided evidence. This brave teenager's testimony would eventually solve Ramona's case. Her courage gave Ramona's family the justice the system had denied them. But first, they had to find Ramona's body. May 10, 2003, 46 days after Ramona vanished. L. Carmichael's phone rings at 1:15 p.m. The voice is unfamiliar, male, calm. "I have information about the missing girl. Go to this address on Kings Highway. Look behind the abandoned house." He hangs up. Carmichael calls the police. This time they respond. Officers from the 67th Precinct and emergency service units race to the location. Behind a burned-out house, they find what they've been dreading for 6 weeks: a blanket, wrapped around something that was once a human being. Ramona Moore's body, decomposed beyond recognition. Dental records would confirm what her family already knew in their hearts. The anonymous caller's identity was never determined. Someone knew what happened to Ramona. Someone with a conscience finally spoke up. But who? And why did they wait so long? That mystery remains unsolved to this day. With Ramona's body recovered, police had a murder case. But they still needed to catch her killers. The break came from that brave 15-year-old survivor. After her escape, she gave police detailed descriptions of her attackers and the basement where she was held. The location matched the Snyder Avenue area where Ramona had disappeared. Police quickly apprehended 19-year-old Troy Hendricks. He was already known to authorities, held at Rikers Island on pending charges. But by law, detectives couldn't question him about Ramona's murder yet. His partner, Cason Pearson, had vanished. Police launched a massive manhunt across the tri-state area. Pearson had an arrest record, burglary, assault. Tips poured in, leading investigators to locations throughout Brooklyn and Albany. All dead ends. The search expanded far beyond New York. Information led them all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, where local police raided an apartment where Pearson was supposedly hiding with his girlfriend. Empty-handed again. Then came the tip that changed everything. Pearson's own friends contacted police. They were sickened by the crimes he was accused of and knew about the ongoing manhunt. They gave police an address, an apartment in Yonkers, May 21, 2003, a little after 5 a.m. Yonkers police set up surveillance cameras outside the apartment building. They weren't taking any chances this time. Officers called the apartment, trying to convince Pearson to surrender peacefully. He refused. The woman whose apartment Pearson was in returned home during the standoff. She handed police a key, but the door was secured with a chain. Bolt cutters were needed to get inside. As authorities breached the apartment, Pearson had already barricaded himself in the bedroom, pushing a bed against the locked door. When officers broke through, they found the room apparently empty. Then Pearson burst out of a closet, knife in hand, lunging at the officers. 2 shots fired. 1 bullet struck him in the thigh. Cason Pearson was finally in handcuffs. During questioning, he initially denied any connection to Ramona's murder, but eventually he broke down and confessed, giving investigators disturbing details that were far worse than anyone had imagined. The case was building, but the most shocking testimony was yet to come, from a witness who had seen Ramona alive in that basement and done nothing to save her. January 18, 2006, nearly 3 years after Ramona's murder, justice finally had its day in court. Brooklyn Supreme Court opening statements begin with prosecutor Anna-Sigga Nicolazzi laying out the horrific details. 2 juries, 1 for each defendant. Troy Hendricks, now 24, Cason Pearson, 25. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA, witness testimony, the 15-year-old survivor ready to face her attackers. But these weren't ordinary defendants. January 19, 2006, day 2 of testimony. As court adjourned, Cason Pearson was being escorted from the courtroom when he suddenly pulled out a concealed knife. Without warning, he lunged forward and stabbed his own defense attorney in the back repeatedly. Chaos erupted. Troy Hendricks saw his opportunity. He vaulted over the courtroom barricade and charged toward a bailiff trying to grab his gun. Security officers tackled both men to the ground as spectators screamed and dove for cover, blood on the courtroom floor. A defense attorney rushed to the hospital. Two defendants who had just proven they were capable of violence anywhere, anytime. The judge had no choice, as trial declared. Ramona's family watched their chance at justice slip away because these monsters couldn't behave even in a courtroom. But prosecutors weren't giving up. March 2006. The second trial begins with unprecedented security measures. Both defendants shackled hand and foot, wearing black foam mittens so they couldn't grip weapons. Extra bailiffs stationed throughout the courtroom, metal detectors, full body searches. This time there would be no escape attempts. Cason Pearson shocked everyone by taking the stand in his own defense. Shackled and wearing those foam mittens, he denied everything. "I hugged her goodbye," he claimed about Ramona, said his confession to police was just creativity. The jury wasn't buying it. The 15-year-old survivor took the stand, looked her attackers in the eye, and described her escape from that basement of horrors. Her courage gave Ramona a voice from the grave. Ramona Jack testified about seeing Ramona chained and beaten and doing nothing. His admission of cowardice haunted the courtroom. Forensic experts presented DNA evidence, crime scene photos, the overwhelming proof that these two predators had tortured and murdered an innocent woman. March 23, 2006, both juries returned their verdicts. Guilty. First-degree murder, kidnapping, rape, sodomy, torture, every single count. April 11, 2006, sentencing day. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 22 years for their courtroom escape attempt. Brooklyn District Attorney Charles Hines spoke to the press. "I am hard-pressed to find a more evil case. I am satisfied that these defendants will never see the outside of a prison cell. Justice for Ramona Moore." Finally. But for her family, the fight was just beginning. After the verdicts, Elle Carmichael stood before the cameras with a message that shook New York City. "All I got was nothing but disrespect from the media and the police," she said. This was a Hunter College student, a black woman. Racist, it's all racist. She wasn't done fighting. While Svetlana Aronoff got press conferences and search teams within hours, Ramona got dismissed and ignored. While white missing persons made headlines, black families were told their daughters probably ran away. Elle Carmichael was going to make sure this never happened again. She filed a federal lawsuit against the NYPD, alleging systematic racial bias in missing persons investigations. The case gained national attention, forcing America to confront an uncomfortable truth about whose lives matter when they disappear. For 6 years, the case worked its way through federal court. August 2014, federal judge Nina Gershon dismissed the lawsuit. Her ruling? No evidence of widespread racially motivated practice within the NYPD. Individual differences between cases, yes. Systemic bias, no. But Elle Carmichael's fight sparked real change. City Councilman Charles Barron proposed the Ramona Moore Law, requiring immediate investigation for anyone 25 or under who goes missing. Hunter College established a scholarship in Ramona's name. East Flatbush organized neighborhood watch programs. Missing persons protocols were updated. Most importantly, people started paying attention when young black women disappeared. Ramona Moore's death exposed the system that failed her. Her mother's fight began to fix it. Today, Troy Hendricks and Cason Pearson remain locked away in maximum security prisons. They will never taste freedom again. Elle Carmichael continues fighting for missing persons reform. The 15-year-old survivor rebuilt her life and became an advocate for assault victims. Her courage saved future victims. The anonymous caller? His identity remains a mystery. The questions that haunt us. Could Ramona have been saved if police acted immediately? How many other families face similar indifference when their loved ones disappear? When will all missing persons receive equal treatment, regardless of race or zip code? Ramona Moore was laid to rest, surrounded by the Caribbean community that loved her. Her headstone reads, "Beloved daughter, student, angel." She was a young woman who made Christmas special for everyone, who earned straight A's, who wanted to heal trauma in others. She deserved to graduate, to help families, to make her mother proud at her wedding. Instead, she became a symbol of how indifference can kill, how some lives are valued less than others. But she also became a catalyst for change, a name that demands we do better. Every missing person deserves the same urgency, the same resources, the same chance at coming home alive. Remember Ramona Moore. May 26, 2016, West Hollywood. When police officers forced their way through the barricaded apartment door, they expected to find a missing woman. What they discovered instead would haunt even the most seasoned investigators for years to come. Inside the master bedroom lay Blake Labelle, heir to a multi-million-dollar Canadian fortune, calmly positioned beside the mutilated body of his fiancée, Yana Kassian. The 30-year-old Ukrainian mother had been scalped. Her blood had been completely drained from her body. According to the coroner, she had been alive and conscious for most of the 8-hour torture session that killed her. But here's what made this case even more chilling. Investigators would soon discover that Blake had written the perfect blueprint for this murder years before he committed it, in a graphic novel that depicted the exact same horrific methods he used to kill the mother of his 3-week-old daughter. This is the horrifying truth behind Hollywood's most calculated killing, and the blueprint for murder that turned fiction into deadly reality. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. To understand this horror, we need to step back into the world of 2016 Hollywood, a time when the American dream still glittered with promise, but darkness lurked beneath the surface. This was the peak of social media obsession, where image was everything and reality could be carefully curated with the right filter. Instagram influencers were reshaping fame, and everyone wanted their slice of Hollywood glamour. It was also the golden age of graphic novels and comic culture. What was once considered niche had exploded into mainstream entertainment, with adaptations dominating box offices worldwide. West Hollywood in 2016 was a study in contrasts. By day, it sparkled with luxury boutiques, trendy cafes, and million-dollar condominiums. By night, it revealed its darker nature, a playground for the wealthy where money could buy silence, access, and protection from consequence. This was pre-Me Too movement, when powerful men with deep pockets operated with virtual impunity. For immigrants like Yana Kassian, America represented the ultimate dream of reinvention and opportunity. The promise that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle seemed within reach in this land of endless possibility. Holloway Drive, where our story unfolds, epitomized this duality. Behind the pristine facades of luxury condominiums lived people whose wealth had insulated them from accountability. Here, Canadian real estate fortunes met Hollywood ambition, creating a toxic environment where privilege collided with vulnerability. It was a time when trust fund kids could buy their way into any industry, when graphic violence in entertainment was celebrated as artistic expression, and when true crime was becoming America's newest obsession. The very culture that would later dissect Blake Labelle's crimes was, in many ways, the same culture that had created the perfect conditions for them to occur. This was the world that would witness one of the most brutal murders in Los Angeles history. Yana Kassian was born on January 27, 1986, in Kiev, Ukraine, a city that in the 1980s was still part of the Soviet Union, where opportunity was scarce and the future uncertain. From an early age, Yana displayed the determination that would define her life. She excelled in her studies, mastered multiple languages, and pursued a law degree with fierce dedication. After graduation, Ayanna became a prosecutor specializing in tax crimes for the Ukrainian government, a position that required courage, as she was tasked with investigating corruption in a system where whistleblowers often faced serious consequences. Those who knew her described a woman who refused to be intimidated, someone who believed deeply in justice and wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. But Ayanna had bigger dreams. In 2014, at age 28, she made the brave decision to immigrate to the United States. Like millions before her, she saw America as a land where hard work and talent could overcome any obstacle, where she could build the life she'd always envisioned. The transition wasn't easy. Despite her law degree and prosecutorial experience, Ayanna had to start over in California. She worked as a model and translator while perfecting her English, taking on whatever work she could find to establish herself. Friends remember her as incredibly intelligent and ambitious, but also kind and generous, the type of person who would go out of her way to help others. Ayanna maintained an extraordinarily close relationship with her mother, Olga. They spoke every single day, sharing dreams, fears, and plans for the future. Ayanna's greatest aspiration was to raise a family in what she called this huge, strong country, to give her future children the opportunities and security that had been denied to her generation in Ukraine. In 2015, her life took a dramatic turn when she met Blake LaBelle. He was everything she thought she wanted: wealthy, charming, and seemingly successful in the entertainment industry. Blake was still married to model Amanda Braun, who was pregnant with their second child, but he told Ayanna his marriage was over. What Ayanna saw as a fairy tale romance was actually a carefully orchestrated deception. Blake showered her with gifts, expensive cars, luxury accommodations, promises of marriage, and a shared future. When Ayanna became pregnant in late 2015, she was overjoyed. This was the family she'd dreamed of, the American dream finally within reach. But red flags emerged quickly after their daughter Diana was born on May 3, 2016. Blake, who had seemed excited about becoming a father, immediately became jealous of the attention Ayanna gave their newborn. In a shocking display of control, he forced Ayanna to send 3-week-old Diana to live with her grandmother Olga in a separate apartment that he paid for. Ayanna was still recovering from her C-section when Blake began making increasingly unreasonable demands. He insisted on constant sexual availability and threatened to leave her for other women if she didn't comply. As his legal troubles mounted, he had recently been arrested for sexually assaulting another girlfriend. His control over Ayanna intensified. In those final weeks, friends noticed Ayanna seemed different. The confident, ambitious woman who had conquered language barriers and built a new life from nothing appeared frightened and isolated. She had nowhere to turn, no family nearby, limited financial resources, and a 3-week-old daughter whose future depended entirely on Blake's continued support. She was trapped, and Blake knew it. Blake LaBelle was born into a world where money solved every problem and privilege opened every door. Born May 8, 1981, he was the son of Lorne Leibel, a Toronto real estate magnate who built over 30,000 homes and amassed a fortune that placed the family among Canada's elite. His mother's side brought even more wealth, the Alrose Products plastics empire, worth millions. Growing up in Toronto's most expensive neighborhoods, Blake had every advantage imaginable. Yet despite this privilege, or perhaps because of it, he harbored a deep resentment. He lived constantly in the shadow of his older brother Cody, who seemed to effortlessly win their father's approval and attention. When his parents separated, the division was telling. Cody lived with their father in the city's most prestigious area, while Blake was relegated to what many considered only the second most expensive neighborhood. After his mother's death in 2011, Blake inherited approximately $6 million. Rather than find purpose or meaning, he used this windfall to fund his Hollywood dreams, moving to Los Angeles in 2004 with unlimited financial backing. In Hollywood, Blake dabbled in entertainment projects, minor work on the animated Spaceballs series, and various small productions. But his most revealing project was a graphic novel called Syndrome, which he helped create in 2010. The story centered on a sadistic doctor studying a serial killer, featuring detailed depictions of victims being drained of blood and hung upside down. The novel's chilling conclusion, "In the end, we all become monsters." Blake's personal relationships revealed a disturbing pattern. He married model Amanda Braun in 2006, but friends described a controlling dynamic where Blake used his wealth to manipulate and dominate. When Amanda became pregnant with their second child in 2015, Blake abruptly abandoned her, walking out just as she was about to give birth. By May 2016, Blake's carefully constructed life was crumbling. He had been arrested for sexually assaulting a third girlfriend. Constance Butchafari and Ayanna had to bail him out, creating enormous tension in their relationship. He was juggling multiple women, multiple lies, and mounting legal pressures. Paranoid and increasingly unstable, Blake had convinced himself that Russian mobsters were threatening his family due to his brother's alleged gambling debts. This created the perfect storm. A narcissistic man losing control, facing legal consequences for the first time in his privileged life, and desperate to regain the power he believed was his birthright. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. May 23, 2016, began like any other day for Ayanna Kasyan. She spent the morning with her mother, Olga, shopping for baby strollers, a happy task for a new mother planning her daughter's future. They laughed, they planned, they dreamed. It would be the last normal day of Ayanna's life. That afternoon, as they browsed through stores, Ayanna's phone began buzzing with text messages from Blake. Olga watched in horror as her daughter's entire demeanor shifted upon reading them. She would change like a chameleon, Olga later testified. The confident, happy woman would instantly transform into someone fearful and anxious. Despite her mother's pleas to stay, Ayanna felt compelled to return to Blake's apartment. She kissed her 3-week-old daughter goodbye, leaving Diana with her grandmother as Blake had demanded. It was the last time Olga would see her daughter alive. May 24th brought an ominous silence. Throughout the day, Olga tried desperately to reach Ayanna. 1 call went unanswered, then 2. By the 6th unanswered call, Olga's maternal instincts were screaming that something was terribly wrong. This was completely unlike Ayanna, who called her mother every single day without fail. Behind the locked doors of the West Hollywood apartment, a nightmare was beginning. Evidence would later reveal that Blake's psychological torture escalated into physical violence that evening. Ayanna tried to call for help, but her attempts were cut short by her captor. What happened next would shock even seasoned homicide investigators. According to forensic analysis, Blake began systematically implementing the torture techniques he had detailed years earlier in his graphic novel Syndrome. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated execution of a plan he had fantasized about for years. The scalping process was designed specifically to keep Ayanna conscious and suffering. Blake used sharp instruments, possibly the green paring knife and bloodied razor blade that police would later find, to methodically remove portions of her scalp from the base of her skull. But this was only the beginning. As Ayanna fought desperately for her life, leaving defensive wounds throughout the apartment, Blake began the process of exsanguination, draining her blood while she remained alive. Dr. James Ribby, the Los Angeles County coroner, would later testify that in his decades of experience, he had never seen this before, outside of wartime. The forensic evidence revealed the true horror of Ayanna's final hours. She had been bitten, beaten, and mutilated, yet somehow survived for at least 8 hours after receiving the initial scalp injury. The torture was calculated to maximize suffering, designed to keep her alive and conscious for as long as possible. Perhaps most chilling of all was Blake's casual behavior during this prolonged torture session. Security footage and delivery records show that he ordered food from Postmates multiple times while Ayanna was dying, specifically instructing drivers not to knock, but to leave the food outside. He didn't want to be interrupted. After Ayanna finally succumbed to her injuries, Blake embarked on a methodical cover-up. He spent hours cleaning blood evidence throughout the apartment, disposing of 11 trash bags filled with bloody sheets, towels, clothing, and pieces of Ayanna's body down the building's garbage chute. Forensic specialists would later use Blue Star technology to reveal the true extent of the violence. Under the specialized lighting, the apartment lit up like a Christmas tree, revealing blood evidence in every room: the kitchen, bathroom, guest bedroom, and hallway. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a bedskirt bearing Blake's distinctive handprint, easily identifiable because he was missing part of his right pinky finger. Blake also prepared for his escape, packing his passport and $4,000 in cash. He positioned Ayanna's body carefully on the bed, covering her mutilated form with a red Mickey Mouse blanket, and cleaned her corpse to remove obvious signs of violence. Meanwhile, Olga's panic was reaching a breaking point. By May 25th, she could no longer bear the silence. Despite the language barrier and her responsibility for baby Diana, she made the desperate decision to go to Blake's apartment herself. Surveillance footage captures the moment another resident opened the building's security gate, and Olga ran through, racing to the 3rd floor. Standing on the street below, she screamed, "Blake, Blake!" at the apartment window. Witnesses saw a figure approach the window, then quickly close it and disappear. When the first police officers arrived for a welfare check, they knocked on the door but left when no one answered. There was no clear indication of distress, and without probable cause, they couldn't force entry. Blake was inside with Ayanna's body, but he remained silent. Olga's desperation intensified overnight. On May 26th, she returned with a translator and demanded police action. Her 911 call was heartbreaking. "Help! Help me! I want the police to free my daughter." This time, police agreed to conduct a welfare check, partly due to concerns about Ayanna's recent childbirth. When they arrived at the apartment, they discovered it was secured from the inside, with hotel-style locks, clear evidence that someone was home. Officers called out repeatedly, "Sheriff's Department, Blake, Ayanna?" When no one responded, they made the decision to breach the door. They found the apartment's interior doors locked and barricaded with mattresses. As police forced their way through each barrier, they began finding blood evidence, first in the guest bedroom, then leading toward the master bedroom, which was also barricaded. From behind that final door, Blake finally spoke, telling officers that Ayanna wasn't home, a lie that would become part of the evidence against him. Blake called his friend and accountant Stephen Green for help. Security footage shows Green racing through the lobby and up to the apartment. It was Green who finally convinced Blake to open the bedroom door and surrender. When officers entered the master bedroom, they found Blake wearing only boxer shorts, lying calmly beside Ayanna's covered body. The Mickey Mouse blanket concealed the true horror of what he had done. Blake had scratches and bruises on his face and a bite mark on his arm, evidence of Ayanna's desperate fight for survival. Blake's demeanor was eerily calm. When questioned about the scene, he simply said, "Science will tell you who did this," a statement that would prove prophetic, as the scientific evidence would indeed reveal his guilt beyond any doubt. As police led Blake away in handcuffs, Olga arrived at the building. She saw her daughter's killer being arrested, but her focus was entirely on the apartment door. She kept looking, waiting, hoping that somehow Ayanna would emerge alive. It was in that hallway that Detective Rob Martindale had to deliver the devastating news. Ayanna was dead. Olga's screams of, "Where is my daughter?" echoed through the building as she tried desperately to crawl toward the apartment where her daughter's body lay. The crime that would be called unprecedented outside of wartime was over, but its impact was just beginning. The science that Blake Leibel had so confidently claimed would exonerate him would instead seal his fate. Crime scene specialist Leslie Thompson arrived at the apartment with equipment that would reveal the true horror of what had occurred within those walls. Using a chemical compound called Blue Star, an advanced version of luminol, Thompson sprayed the apartment's surfaces. When the lights went out, The truth blazed forth in an eerie blue glow. The apartment, as investigators described it, lit up like a Christmas tree. Blood evidence appeared everywhere: the kitchen, the bathroom, both bedrooms, and the hallway. Footprints glowed on the floor, showing Blake's movements as he tracked Diana's blood throughout the apartment. Wiping patterns revealed his desperate attempts to clean the evidence. Even areas that appeared spotless to the naked eye revealed the massive scope of violence that had occurred. In the building's dumpster, investigators recovered 11 trash bags containing the missing pieces of the puzzle: bloody bedding, towels, clothing, and horrifyingly, pieces of Ayana's scalp and hair. DNA analysis confirmed that all blood evidence belonged exclusively to Ayana and Blake. There was no mysterious third party, no alternative explanation for the carnage. But perhaps the most chilling evidence was hiding in plain sight. Years before he met Ayana, Blake had co-created a graphic novel called Syndrome. The cover depicted a baby doll with its scalp partially removed. Inside, detailed illustrations showed victims hanging upside down while their blood was drained from their bodies. The parallels were undeniable. The prosecution argued that Syndrome had served as Blake's blueprint for murder, and the evidence supported this terrifying theory. The novel's methodology matched the crime scene exactly: scalping designed to keep victims conscious, systematic blood drainage, and prolonged torture. The graphic novel's final line, "In the end, we all become monsters," had proven prophetic. This wasn't a sudden explosion of violence. It was the culmination of years of fantasy rehearsal. Blake had mentally practiced this murder countless times through his artistic work, perfecting his techniques on fictional victims before applying them to the woman he claimed to love. In June 2018, 2 years after Ayana's murder, Blake Leibel faced trial on charges of first-degree murder, torture, and aggravated mayhem. The prosecution presented overwhelming forensic evidence: the DNA, the blood patterns, the graphic novel, and the defendant's own behavior. Blake's defense team could offer no alternative theory, no credible explanation for the evidence. Their client, photographed smiling oddly in his arrest mugshot, seemed to embody the callous evil he was accused of. Throughout the trial, only his brother Cody attended to support him. The rest of his wealthy family remained conspicuously absent. The jury needed just 3 hours to reach their verdict: guilty on all counts. Blake Leibel would spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the legal proceedings weren't over. In a civil wrongful death lawsuit, a judge awarded Ayana's family $41,600,000 in damages. Blake refused to attend these proceedings, and tellingly, not a single member of the wealthy Leibel family appeared to accept responsibility or offer support. Despite their vast fortune, the Leibels completely abandoned any financial obligation to Diana, their own blood relative. The burden of raising Blake's daughter and explaining her father's unspeakable crimes fell entirely on Olga, a Ukrainian grandmother struggling to make ends meet. The justice system had recognized the unprecedented nature of Blake's cruelty, but money, it seemed, could still buy the ultimate privilege: the ability to walk away from consequences entirely. While Blake Leibel serves his life sentence in California's Centinela State Prison, the real victims of his cruelty continue to suffer every single day. Olga Kasian, now in her 60s, has become the sole guardian of 3-year-old Diana in Ukraine, far from the American dream that Ayana had envisioned for her daughter. Every morning, Olga wakes up to care for the child, who carries the DNA of both her beloved daughter and the monster who destroyed their family. The $41,600,000 civil judgment remains largely symbolic. Despite the Leiber family's vast wealth, estimated in the hundreds of millions, they have paid nothing toward Diana's care. Olga struggles financially to provide for her granddaughter while dealing with her own trauma and grief. Immigration complications prevent her from returning to the United States, trapping her in a cycle of poverty that wealth could easily solve. The psychological burden is immense. Olga lives with constant reminders of Ayana's final hours of terror. Yet she must somehow find the strength to raise Diana with love and stability. She keeps photos of Iana throughout their small home, determined that Diana will know her mother's story, though she dreads the day she must explain how that story ended. Diana herself represents one of this case's most heartbreaking elements. She is growing up in Ukraine rather than America, denied not only her mother's presence but also the opportunities Iana died trying to secure for her. The wealthy Liebel family, who could easily provide for their own blood relative, have chosen complete abandonment. Diana will someday learn that her father's family possessed the means to transform her life, but simply chose not to care. This case has left lasting impacts beyond the immediate victims. Dr. James Wright's assessment that this was the most extreme torture case he'd seen outside of wartime has become a benchmark for forensic pathologists. The case has sparked new discussions about how fictional violence can become a real-world blueprint, raising questions about warning signs in creative works. Law enforcement protocols have been enhanced for domestic violence cases involving recent mothers, recognizing the particular vulnerability of women in Iana's situation. Immigration advocates have pointed to this case as an example of how documentation status can trap victims in abusive relationships. Perhaps most troubling are the broader cultural questions this case raises. Blake Liebel's story demonstrates how extreme wealth can hide and enable psychopathic behavior for decades. His privileged background, attractive appearance, and generous spending created a perfect disguise for his true nature. The case also highlights the dangerous vulnerability of immigrants seeking the American dream and how easily they can be exploited by those who view their desperation as opportunity. Most damning of all is the Liebel family's response, or lack thereof. Their complete abandonment of Diana reveals how wealth can purchase not just comfort and opportunity, but also the ultimate privilege, the ability to walk away from moral responsibility entirely. Iana Cassian was more than the horrific circumstances of her death. She was a prosecutor who fought corruption, an immigrant who mastered new languages and cultures, a mother who dreamed of giving her daughter opportunities she never had. Her 3 weeks of motherhood were stolen by a man who saw her strength as something to destroy rather than celebrate. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How many warning signs were dismissed because Blake's wealth made him seem like a catch rather than a threat? How do we protect vulnerable people from predators who wear privilege as a disguise? The answers begin with recognition. Understanding that isolation and control are abuse, regardless of how much money cushions the cage. We must remember that evil doesn't always look like our worst fears. Sometimes it looks like everything we're taught to want. Iana Cassian deserved to see her daughter grow up in the America she believed in. That dream died with her, but her story lives on as a warning we cannot afford to ignore. If you enjoyed this content, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.